Hello, this video is going to be about soldier's disease, and I do think that this is a very important topic to talk about and for people to learn about because I did not know much about this and the history behind it, but I think it's important when thinking about substance abuse, especially opioid addiction and the relations it has with veterans and the history behind it. So let's get into it. What is soldier's disease? Soldier's disease is the name given to morphine and opium addiction when referring to veterans. This was discovered around the Civil War time when soldiers came home as addicts from the years 1861 through 1876. The way that this happened was because morphine and opium were commonly used to treat injuries or illnesses of war, whether it was a gunshot wound, a field amputation, or a serious illness running rampant through the camps. These drugs were preferred because they're very potent, as we have learned, and they provided instant relief. The way that they were used during this time was in the form of morphine injections and opium pills. How did this affect after the war? Well, soldiers came back from the Civil War only to start their own battle of addiction. The only problem is addiction was stigmatized during this time, and struggling veterans were seen as immoral and unmanly. During this time, addiction was not very well understood. There was not research on it. It was a very new thing. And so people coming back home struggling with this, there was not a lot of support from their family, their friends, and as a society, it was seen as something to look down upon. Because of this, veterans were given no medical care or sympathy when it came to addiction. Veterans during that time referred to their addiction as opium slavery or morphine mania, which is really upsetting because there were definitely steps that could have been used to help them during this time, especially when it wasn't necessarily their choice to start these drugs. The only form of care received by some of the veterans were when their family would abruptly take the drugs away and have them go through a withdrawals within an institution or hidden away from society because it did put shame on the family name and it was something that as a society was not talked about. This continued on through World War I and World War II. Morphine injections and opium pills were still used in the wars following the Civil War. With specifically in World War II, morphine syrettes were placed inside med kits given to each soldier so that they could treat their own wounds on the field if needed, if necessary. And they looked like this, like the picture I've attached on the right. A syrette is defined as a flexible tube attached to a needle. So instead of a hard tube like a shot has, it's a squeezable tube with a needle. Each morphine syrette contained about 1.5 cc's of morphine. The only step taken between the Civil War and the World Wars for addiction prevention was a warning on the label that stated that morphine may be habit forming. The aftermath of these wars was the continued lack of knowledge on addiction, and veterans continued to come home and receive no help with these addictions and their struggles. Veterans were stealing med kits to grab the morphine inside to be able to use, and if a lot of the veterans, if they could not get a hold of morphine or opium, they turned to harder drugs such as heroin. People didn't understand really what physical dependence was and how addiction occurs through consistent use and increase in dosages, which was exactly the recipe that they used during the pain management during these wars. And that resulted in sending the soldiers home with addictions. Um, so the current military protocol for pain management is still morphine injections. It's a morphine sulfate auto-injector, and it looks like the picture I've attached on the right. It administers 10 milligrams of morphine, though the government is performing studies and fighting for the use of ketamine instead for pain management and in med kits because it is a non-opioid and studies show less addictive than opioids. And these are my references. Thank you.